There are some books that don't just inform you, they shake you awake. Daring Greatly is one of those rare books. Written by Dr. Brené Brown, a research professor at the University of Houston, this book was first published in 2012. But even over a decade later, it feels like it was written for today, for the world we're living in right now. Brené Brown isn't your typical self-help writer. She's a storyteller, yes, but she's also a grounded, no-nonsense researcher who spent over 12 years studying vulnerability, courage, shame, and worthiness before this book ever hit the shelves. And when you hear her speak or read her work, you can tell, this isn't fluff. This is deep, real, evidence-based wisdom, told with the heart of someone who genuinely gets it. So what is Daring Greatly really about? It's about vulnerability. Now, that might sound like a soft word at first glance, but Brown flips the script. She shows us that vulnerability isn't weakness at all. In fact, it's the most accurate measure of courage we've got. Whether you're stepping into a new job, falling in love, raising kids, speaking your truth, or chasing a dream, vulnerability is the birthplace of all of it. The idea that to live a full life, we have to be willing to show up and be seen, even when we can't control the outcome. That's what Daring Greatly is all about. The title itself comes from a powerful quote by Theodore Roosevelt, the one about the man in the arena. Brown uses this metaphor as the heartbeat of the book. She challenges us not to stay in the bleachers of life, throwing opinions from a safe distance, but to step into the arena, get messy, take risks, and live wholeheartedly. When this book came out, the world was already moving fast. Social media was exploding, perfectionism was creeping into every corner of our lives, and people were feeling more disconnected than ever, despite being more digitally connected than any generation before. Daring Greatly arrived like a wake-up call. It told us, you don't have to armor up. You don't have to numb yourself to survive. You can live bravely, love deeply, and lead with your whole heart. And today, it's even more relevant. In a world filled with comparison, cancel culture, impossible standards, and constant pressure to perform, this book gives us permission to slow down and lean into what really matters. To stop pretending. To stop hustling for our worth. And to start living from a place of courage and compassion. If you've ever felt like you're not enough, or maybe too much, this book is for you. If you've ever avoided speaking up, chasing a goal, or opening your heart because you feared judgment or failure, this book will meet you where you are, and invite you to dare greatly. This isn't about being fearless. It's about being brave while afraid. And that subtle difference? It's everything. So let's dive in. Let's explore how vulnerability can become your superpower, how shame loses its grip when we name it, and how courage is not something reserved for heroes, it's something we practice, one imperfect day at a time. Let's dive in this book chapter by chapter. Chapter 1, Scarcity, looking inside our culture of never enough. Let me take you into the heart of where this journey begins, the world of scarcity. Imagine waking up each morning and, before your feet even touch the ground, your first thought is, I didn't get enough sleep. And then, fast forward to the end of that day, you lay your head on the pillow and your final thought is, I didn't get enough done. Sound familiar? Yeah. That's scarcity. That's the silent soundtrack playing in the background of so many of our lives. And in this first chapter, Brené Brown calls it out, clear and loud. She paints the picture of a culture that's obsessed with not enough, not thin enough, not successful enough, not smart enough, not cool enough, not safe enough, not strong enough. It's a culture that thrives on fear, fear of being ordinary, fear of failing, fear of not measuring up, and fear of being seen too clearly. And this fear? It doesn't just float in the air, it sinks deep into us. Into how we parent, how we lead, how we love, and how we show up every single day. Brené calls this the never enough problem. It's not just a passing thought, it's a way of life. And once we internalize it, once it becomes the lens through which we see the world, we stop showing up. We armor up. We protect ourselves from being judged, from being seen as weak, from being less than. And that's where things start to break down. She writes about how scarcity thrives in shame. And shame, as Breen has studied for over a decade, is that deeply painful belief that we're flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. It whispers in our ears, telling us that if people really knew us, if they saw our messy parts, they'd walk away. So what do? We hide. We hustle. We pretend. We compare. Comparison is a huge piece of the scarcity puzzle. We don't just worry about being enough. We start looking sideways, measuring ourselves against everyone else. Social media makes this worse. We scroll through filtered lives, highlight reels, people who seem to have it all together. And suddenly, our perfectly human, imperfect life feels like a failure. It's exhausting. It's defeating. And it's dangerous. Then there's disengagement, another effect of scarcity. When people don't feel safe, when they don't believe they matter, they check out. They go through the motions but don't bring their hearts. In classrooms, in marriages, in companies, when there's no space for real connection, we lose motivation, creativity, and passion. Disengagement is a silent epidemic. And it's not because people don't care, it's because they're protecting themselves from getting hurt. Now here's where Breen does something brilliant. She connects all of this back to vulnerability. Scarcity teaches us that vulnerability is weakness. But Breen flips the script. She says no. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's courage. It's the willingness to show up and be seen when you can't control the outcome. It's risking emotional exposure, not because it's comfortable, but because it's worth it. She uses a powerful metaphor throughout the book, the arena. Inspired by Theodore Roosevelt's speech, "The man in the arena," Breen invites us to step into our own arena. To stop standing on the sidelines, judging ourselves and others, and to start living brave, messy, wholehearted lives. But stepping into the arena requires us to shed the armor. To let go of perfectionism, of shame, of numbing, and face the fear of not enough, head on. That's where daring greatly begins. With the radical, countercultural belief that we are already enough. That worthiness is not something we earn. It's something we claim. And that the only way to live fully, love deeply, and lead bravely is to walk straight through the fear of scarcity and choose vulnerability instead. The beauty of this chapter is how it gently, yet powerfully, opens our eyes to what we've been soaking in for far too long. It's not accusatory. It's not preachy. It's human. It's real. And by the end, you don't just understand scarcity, you feel it. And more importantly, you feel the call to reject it. To step into the light of enoughness. To stop hiding and start showing up. So if you've ever felt like you had to earn your worth, if you've ever stayed quiet to avoid judgment, if you've ever felt like you were the only one who didn't have it all together, Chapter 1 reminds you, you're not alone. And more than that, you don't have to live that way anymore. This is the beginning. This is the moment you step into your arena. Next is debunking the vulnerability myths. Brené Brown rolls up her sleeves and gets into something most of us misunderstand: vulnerability. This chapter is about breaking down the myths, the lies we've been told, or maybe told ourselves, about what it really means to be vulnerable. Let's face it. For most people, the word vulnerability brings up images of weakness. Being exposed. Being soft. Being unsafe. It sounds like something we should run from, not embrace. But Breen starts this chapter by setting the record straight, and she doesn't tiptoe around it. She says, in no uncertain terms, that vulnerability is not weakness. In fact, it's the most accurate measure of courage. Think about that for a second. Vulnerability. Being willing to open yourself up, to speak your truth, to risk being rejected or misunderstood, is the very thing that takes the most guts. It's the moment when the outcome is unknown, but you show up anyway. Now, throughout this chapter, Breen takes us through 4 major myths about vulnerability. And with each one, she gently pulls back the curtain and helps us see what's really going on beneath the surface. The first myth? Vulnerability is weakness. This is the big one. It's the story so many of us carry, especially in cultures where strength is celebrated as being stoic, composed, and always in control. But Breen challenges that. She says, show me a single act of courage, a real, raw, meaningful act of bravery, that didn't require vulnerability. Whether it's asking for help, saying, "I love you," First, confronting someone who hurt you, starting a business, or raising your hand and saying, "I don't know." Vulnerability is at the core. Every single time. The second myth? I don't do vulnerability. Oh man, this one's everywhere. It shows up in leaders who shut down emotions in the workplace, in parents who avoid uncomfortable conversations, in people who think vulnerability is for someone else, anyone but them. But here's the truth, we all do vulnerability. The only question is whether we do it consciously or unconsciously, with intention or by default. Because vulnerability shows up in those crucial moments of our lives, whether we like it or not. The third myth is, vulnerability is letting it all hang out. Now, this is important. Brené makes it very clear, being vulnerable doesn't mean oversharing. It doesn't mean dumping your deepest wounds on strangers or spilling every secret. Vulnerability is about connection, not attention. It's about choosing to share when there's purpose, trust, and potential for growth. There's a big difference between being honest and being reckless with your story. And the fourth myth? We can go it alone. This one is sneaky because it sounds noble at first. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Don't rely on anyone. Be self-sufficient. But Brené challenges that fiercely. She reminds us that we are wired for connection. Human beings need each other. Vulnerability isn't just about being open. It's about reaching out. Saying, "I can't do this alone." It's about choosing community over isolation. And that choice? That's one of the bravest things you can do. What makes this chapter so powerful isn't just what Brené says, it's how she says it. She speaks with warmth, clarity, and deep understanding. She brings in stories from her research, real people, real struggles. And every example she shares reminds us that vulnerability is not some lofty ideal. It's daily, it's human, and it's already a part of us. She talks about people in high-stakes jobs, like military service members and first responders, who told her that vulnerability is at the core of every meaningful mission. She talks about entrepreneurs, teachers, parents, couples, people who risk emotional exposure in order to live fully. And what she found over and over again was this: vulnerability is where growth happens, where connection is built, where joy, love, creativity, and belonging are born. But here's the hard part. Vulnerability requires boundaries. It requires discernment. You don't throw yourself out into the world without protection. You choose your people. You earn trust slowly. You share with those who've earned the right to hear your story. And that's not weakness, that's wisdom. By the time you reach the end of this chapter, you can't help but feel a shift. You start to see that vulnerability isn't something to fear, it's something to honor. It's not a liability, it's a superpower. It's what makes us real, relatable, and resilient. And here's the final takeaway Brené leaves us with in this chapter. Vulnerability is the birthplace of everything we crave: love, belonging, joy, empathy, and creativity. If we shut it down, we don't just avoid pain, we also block out all the good stuff. The real stuff. So the next time you feel that urge to armor up, to keep it cool, to hold back out of fear, remember this: the people who dare greatly are the ones who show up. Fully. Imperfectly. Courageously. And yes, vulnerably. Next is Chapter 3, Understanding and Combating Shame. Let's get real for a second. If vulnerability is the birthplace of connection and courage, then shame is its greatest enemy. And in Chapter 3, Brené Brown dives straight into the heart of it. No filters. No fluff. Just the raw truth about what shame is, how it operates, and how we can fight back. Shame isn't guilt. That's the first thing she clears up. Guilt says, "I did something bad." Shame says, "I am bad." It's that quiet, corrosive voice that creeps in when we feel like we're not enough, when we mess up, when we fall short, when we feel exposed. And the worst part? It's sneaky. Shame hides. It thrives in silence, secrecy, and judgment. Brené doesn't speak from some high horse here. She's not just a researcher, she's a fellow traveler. She's sat across from thousands of people in interviews, in conversations, and what she's learned is that shame is universal. Every single one of us feels it. Men, women, teenagers, CEOs, stay-at-home parents, we've all been there. And the more we pretend we haven't, the more power shame has over us. In this chapter, she introduces a game-changing idea, shame resilience. Because here's the thing, shame is inevitable, but it doesn't have to define us. The key is learning how to recognize it, talk about it, and move through it with compassion. Let's break that down. First, recognize shame when it shows up. Brené shares that shame has physical symptoms. It can feel like your throat is closing, like a punch in the gut, like you want to disappear. And when those signs show up, that's your red flag. That's your moment to pause and say, "Hold on, I know what this is." Second, understand your shame triggers. This part is deep. For many of us, shame comes from what Brené calls shame tapes, old stories we've played in our heads for years. Maybe someone once told you that you weren't smart enough, or that you were too emotional, or that you had to be perfect to be loved. Those stories get embedded, and they show up when we feel vulnerable. Shame tells us we're unworthy. And if we're not careful, we start believing it. Third, reach out. Shame loves isolation. It thrives when we keep things hidden. But the moment we speak our shame, out loud, to someone who's earned our trust, it starts to lose its grip. Brené calls this the power of empathy. When someone looks us in the eye and says, "Yeah, I've been there too," it changes everything. It breaks the silence. It creates space for healing. And finally, talk to yourself with the voice of empathy and self-compassion. This might sound soft, but it's powerful. It means learning to say, "I'm human. I'm imperfect. And that's okay." It means giving yourself the kind of kindness you'd offer a friend. Because shame only grows when we judge ourselves. It fades when we treat ourselves with care. Brené also gets into how shame shows up differently for men and women. And this part? It hits home. For women, shame is often tied to appearance, motherhood, being everything to everyone, and never letting people down. There's this pressure to look perfect, parent perfectly, love perfectly, live perfectly, and do it all without breaking a sweat. It's exhausting. For men, shame is usually tied to one unshakable message. Do not be perceived as weak. From the time boys are young, they're taught to toughen up, don't cry, don't show emotion, don't fall apart. And that creates walls that keep them from connecting, from asking for help, from showing up fully. This chapter is powerful because it doesn't just diagnose the problem, it gives us tools. It helps us understand that shame is not a reflection of our true worth. It's a story we've been handed by society, by culture, by trauma. And we have the power to rewrite it. There's a moment Brené shares in this chapter that really sticks. She says, "Shame cannot survive being spoken. It cannot survive empathy." That's the heart of it. The more we name our shame, the more we speak it in safe spaces, the more we allow ourselves to be seen and known, the less power it has. She invites us to become shame resilient, not by pretending we're invincible, but by owning our stories. By standing in the arena, even when it's messy and hard, and saying, "This is me. I'm showing up anyway." Because in the end, shame resilience isn't about being perfect. It's about being brave. Next is Chapter 4, The Vulnerability Armory. Alright. Let's slow down for a second and talk about the masks we wear, the ones we put on so naturally, we don't even realize they're there anymore. In this chapter, Brené Brown introduces us to what she calls the vulnerability armory. And it's exactly what it sounds like, a psychological suit of armor we throw on whenever we feel exposed, scared, or at risk of being seen for who we really are. Now, we might think we're just being careful, or strong, but the truth? This armor is weighing us down. And it's keeping us from the one thing we crave more than anything else, real connection. Brené begins by saying something brutally honest: we all armor up. Every single one of us. Vulnerability feels like risk, and when we're afraid, we protect. It's human. But the problem isn't that we try to protect ourselves, it's that we're protecting ourselves from the very things we need most. Let's walk through the 3 most common pieces of this emotional armor, the ones Brené sees again and again in her research, in her interviews, and in her own life. Each one of these is subtle. They can look like strength from the outside, but on the inside? They're often signs of fear. The first one? Foreboding joy. Sounds strange, right? But it's incredibly real. Foreboding joy is what happens when things are going too well, and instead of feeling grateful, we start bracing for disaster. It's that moment when you're looking at your sleeping child and suddenly imagine them getting hurt. When you land the job of your dreams, and a voice whispers, "Don't get too happy, it might not last." Breen says this is one of the most universal defense mechanisms out there. We dress rehearse tragedy because we think it'll protect us from pain. But it doesn't. It robs us of joy. And it keeps us from fully living in the moments that matter. Her answer? Gratitude. Over and over again. Gratitude is how we stay grounded when joy shows up. It keeps us present. It reminds us that this moment, right here, is real. It doesn't mean pain won't come. But we don't have to suffer twice, once in fear, and again in reality. Breen says, when we lose our tolerance for vulnerability, joy becomes foreboding. Gratitude is how we build that tolerance back up. The second piece of armor is one that many people wear with pride: perfectionism. Let's be real. Our culture worships perfection. Look perfect, act perfect, parent perfectly, lead flawlessly. But here's the truth that Breen unpacks. Perfectionism is not about healthy striving. It's about shame. It's the belief that if we just do everything without making a single mistake, we'll be safe from judgment and rejection. But guess what? Perfectionism doesn't protect us from shame, it drives us deeper into it. It tells us that our worth is conditional. That we have to earn love and acceptance by never failing, never falling short, never letting anyone see the cracks. And over time, that belief becomes a prison. Breen encourages us to practice self-compassion instead of self-criticism. She talks about how perfectionism is rooted in fear of being seen as inadequate. But true belonging can only happen when we're willing to be seen, imperfections and all. We don't connect with people who seem perfect. We connect with people who are real. So instead of asking, "How can I be perfect?" she invites us to ask, "What's the most honest and kind thing I can do right now?" And then there's the third layer of armor, numbing. When we don't want to feel vulnerable, when we're tired, overwhelmed, anxious, we turn to distraction. We numb. And numbing doesn't always look like addiction or self-destruction. Sometimes it looks like scrolling on our phones for hours. Or staying busy just to avoid stillness. Or pouring ourselves into work so we don't have to face the quiet. Here's what Breen teaches us. You can't selectively numb emotions. When you numb the pain, you also numb the joy. You numb creativity. You numb wonder. You numb the things that make life worth living. And the antidote to numbing? It's not just stop. That's not how it works. It's mindfulness, boundaries, self-awareness, connection. It's building a life where you don't feel like you constantly have to escape. It's about asking, what am I really feeling right now? And sitting with it, without judgment, without panic. By the end of this chapter, Breen makes it clear, vulnerability is a practice. Choosing to take off the armor, even for a moment, is an act of courage. It's scary. It's uncomfortable. But it's also the only path to joy, creativity, love, and belonging. She reminds us that this is not about becoming someone new, it's about coming home to who we already are, underneath the layers of fear and defense. We don't have to be fearless to be brave. We just have to be willing to show up, again and again, and trust that we're worthy of love, not in spite of our imperfections, but because of them. Let's move on to Chapter 5, Mind the Gap. Have you ever felt like you're stuck between two versions of yourself? The version you want to be and the version you feel like you're forced to be? The person you know you are deep down versus the version the world asks you to present? This is the gap Brené Brown talks about in Chapter 5, and it's a gap we all know too well. Breen calls this phenomenon the vulnerability gap. It's that space between who we are and who we're trying to appear to be, between our authentic selves and the carefully curated versions we show to the world. And let me tell you, this gap is a huge source of stress, anxiety, and emotional strain in modern life. In this chapter, Breen explores why we feel the need to close that gap, and why it's actually the very thing that's keeping us from the deeper connections, creativity, and joy that vulnerability makes possible. Here's the deal. Breen says that we all, at some point, feel the weight of disconnection. The gap between who we really are and who we present to the world can make us feel out of place, like we're pretending or wearing a mask. And we live in a world that constantly tells us to fit in, to keep up, and to be perfect. This drives us to pretend we're someone we're not, to hide parts of ourselves, and to deny our real emotions. But the problem is that perfectionism and people-pleasing only deepen the gap. The more we try to conform to other people's standards, the more we disconnect from our true selves. And that's when vulnerability becomes really hard. How can we show up as our real selves if we feel like our real selves are not enough? How can we be vulnerable with people if we're afraid of being judged or rejected for showing our imperfections? Breen points out that the fear of being found out is one of the most powerful forms of shame we carry. It's the idea that if someone truly sees us, our mistakes, our fears, our flaws, they won't accept us. They won't love us. So we hide. We fake it. We try to be someone else. And that's what creates the gap. But the breakthrough Breen offers is powerful. It's this very gap that keeps us stuck. When we try to fill it with armor, like perfectionism, people-pleasing, or numbing, we create even more distance between our authentic selves and the people around us. And it's this distance that robs us of connection. The solution? We have to close the gap, but not by hiding who we are. We close the gap by showing up, flaws and all. Breen encourages us to practice showing up in our lives, whether that's at work, in our relationships, or in our communities, as our authentic selves. This is where true courage and vulnerability come into play. Instead of pretending to be someone else, instead of fearing judgment, we allow ourselves to be seen, exactly as we are. And here's a key piece of advice that Breen shares: vulnerability is not something you do once and then you're done. It's a practice. It's an ongoing choice to show up and be yourself, even when the world might be telling you to do otherwise. In this chapter, Breen also dives into the role of shame in keeping us stuck in the gap. Shame is the feeling that says, "You're not enough." It tells us that if people really knew us, they wouldn't love us. It convinces us that we need to be perfect or else we'll be rejected. And the most dangerous thing about shame? It thrives in silence. The more we hide it, the more it grows. Breen's challenge to us in this chapter is simple yet profound. Talk about it. Talk about the gap, the shame, the fear of being found out. Vulnerability thrives in connection. When we open up about our insecurities and let ourselves be seen, it helps break the grip of shame. It says to others, "I'm enough just as I am. And so are you." This chapter is about finding the courage to say, "I'm not perfect, and that's okay." And you know what happens when we do that? We create the possibility for something incredible, real connection. When we stop pretending, when we stop closing the gap with armor, we give ourselves the chance to connect on a deeper level. We give others the chance to see us as we are. And in that space, vulnerability is no longer a burden, it becomes a bridge. A bridge to deeper relationships, to richer experiences, and to a life that's more meaningful because it's more real. Breen finishes the chapter by saying something powerful. We don't have to be perfect to be worthy of love and belonging. In fact, it's the imperfections that make us human. It's the willingness to show up in our messiness and say, "This is me." That's where true belonging happens. So, what's the message here? Close the gap. Stop trying to fit into someone else's idea of who you should be. Instead, show up as yourself. Vulnerable. Imperfect. Real. That's how we begin to live daring greatly. Next is Chapter 6, Disruptive Engagement. Let's talk about something that can shake us to the core: disruptive engagement. Brené Brown starts this chapter by introducing the idea of engagement in the context of vulnerability. Now, we often think of engagement as simply being involved, showing up, or participating. But Brené takes it further. She doesn't just want us to show up in our lives. She wants us to engage, actively, intentionally, with our hearts and minds fully in the game. But here's the kicker: engagement is not always comfortable. If we're really going to live vulnerably, if we're going to connect deeply with others, we have to lean into the discomfort of being truly present. This means showing up when it's hard, speaking our truth when it's risky, and making ourselves open to the possibility of rejection, criticism, or failure. Brené introduces the idea of disruptive engagement as an act of boldness. It's not just about passively participating in life. It's about actively challenging the status quo. It's about choosing to be involved in a way that shakes things up, sometimes in unexpected and uncomfortable ways. Think about the last time you really disagreed with someone. Maybe it was a colleague, a friend, or even a family member. How did you respond? Did you keep quiet to avoid confrontation? Or did you speak up, risking discomfort in the name of honesty and connection? Disruptive engagement is about making that choice, choosing to speak up even when it feels easier to stay quiet. It's about leaning into discomfort and disrupting patterns of behavior that keep us from being real with one another. And why is this so important? Brené explains that in today's world, staying silent and hiding behind facades is the default mode for most people. We live in a world where judgment and criticism are rampant, and it's easier to keep our opinions to ourselves, avoid tough conversations, and not rock the boat. But when we stay quiet, we create disconnection. It's when we stay silent that we begin to believe the lie that we don't matter, that our thoughts, feelings, and experiences are insignificant. Disruptive engagement, however, creates connection. It forces us to engage with others in a way that is honest and vulnerable, breaking through the noise and the facades. Brené argues that we can't wait for the perfect moment to engage. We can't wait until we have all the answers, or until we're certain we'll be accepted or heard. True engagement requires us to show up even when we're uncertain, even when we're afraid. The goal isn't to be perfect, it's to be present. To be engaged with life, with the people around us, with our work, and with our purpose in a way that is full and alive. And here's something profound Brené highlights. Disruptive engagement requires us to be clear on what we care about. When we're unclear about what matters most to us, when we don't have a deep sense of what we stand for, we become passive. We let the world dictate our choices, and we let fear drive us to remain silent and small. But when we know what we value, when we're connected to our authentic selves, engagement becomes a powerful force. It's no longer about just showing up to avoid confrontation or conflict. It's about actively engaging in the things that truly matter to us, even if that means challenging the norms, pushing back against the status quo, or risking vulnerability. Brené shares that engagement and vulnerability are inseparable. To engage fully, we have to risk being vulnerable. We have to be willing to open ourselves up, even when it feels risky. This means showing up in our relationships with honesty, sharing our thoughts and feelings even when we're scared, and taking action when the stakes are high. And here's the hard truth: vulnerability doesn't guarantee success. Disruptive engagement might not lead to instant validation or recognition, but it does lead to something much more important: connection. Real, raw connection. Brené also talks about the role of leaders in creating spaces for disruptive engagement. A leader who is willing to be vulnerable, who speaks their truth and engages with others in an authentic way, creates a culture where others feel safe to do the same. Vulnerability, when modeled, becomes an invitation for others to engage in the same honest, disruptive way. But here's where it gets even deeper. Disruptive engagement doesn't just happen in moments of conflict. It also happens in everyday life. It happens when we speak up for what we believe in, when we act with integrity, even when it's hard. When we stay engaged with our values and beliefs, even when the world around us wants us to stay small. And let's not forget, disruptive engagement is a practice. It's not something that happens overnight. It's about showing up, time and time again, and choosing to be vulnerable, to speak the truth, and to connect deeply, even when it feels uncomfortable. By the end of the chapter, Brené sums it up perfectly. The most courageous thing we can do is show up and be seen, even when it's messy. Even when we feel unsure of ourselves. Disruptive engagement isn't about perfection. It's about showing up with our whole selves and choosing to engage with life as it is, raw, real, and full of possibilities. Next is Chapter 7, Wholehearted Parenting. Parenting. It's a journey that's equal parts joy, struggle, and everything in between. And if there's one thing that Brené Brown underscores in Chapter 7 of Daring Greatly, it's that parenting with vulnerability and wholeheartedness can change the way we raise our children, and change the way we show up for them every single day. Brené begins by acknowledging the profound challenge of being a parent. After all, there's no manual that can prepare us for every situation, every challenge, or every beautiful, unpredictable moment. But there is something that can guide us: our own wholeheartedness. So, what does wholehearted parenting really mean? It means being fully present with our children, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. It means showing up as our authentic selves, even when we feel scared or unsure. It means leaning into the vulnerability of being a parent, and allowing ourselves to be seen, all of us, the mess, the imperfections, and the lessons we're still learning. And here's where Brené really hits home: our children don't need perfect parents. In fact, Brené says the most important thing we can give our children is the freedom to be imperfect, just as we are. Our kids need to see that it's okay to mess up, that it's okay to fail, and that it's okay to struggle. Why? Because imperfection is part of being human. Brené explains that, as parents, we often get caught up in trying to protect our children from pain, disappointment, and failure. We want to shield them from hurt, to make their lives as smooth as possible. But here's the catch: when we try to protect our children from the full spectrum of human experience, we risk disconnecting them from the very lessons that help them grow. We create a gap between them and the vulnerability that's necessary for them to learn resilience, empathy, and courage. Parenting with vulnerability means being honest with your kids, not just when things are good, but when things are hard. It means sharing your struggles, talking about your feelings, and showing them that it's okay to be human. Brené reminds us that modeling vulnerability is a powerful teaching tool. When we let our children see that we don't have all the answers, that we don't always know what to do next, we create a space for them to also be open, honest, and brave in their own lives. And Brené makes an important point here: parenting is not about perfectionism, it's about presence. So much of our stress as parents comes from the pressure to be the perfect role model, to be the perfect provider, to be the perfect everything. But perfectionism isn't healthy, it's an illusion. Instead of striving for perfection, Brené urges us to embrace imperfection, not just in ourselves, but in the way we approach our children. Let's talk about shame for a moment. We all know how toxic shame can be. It creeps in and tells us that we're not enough. And in parenting, it can be particularly damaging. Parents often feel ashamed when they feel they're not doing enough for their kids or when they think they're falling short. But here's the kicker: shame is never a good motivator. When we parent out of shame, we create an environment where our children feel like they are never enough. They feel like they have to earn love and acceptance by being perfect. And that's not a message we want to send. So, Brené challenges us to ask, how do we model self-compassion for our children? Instead of giving them the message that they have to be perfect to be worthy, we need to show them that they are worthy of love and acceptance, just as they are. This means offering ourselves the same kindness, forgiveness, and understanding we want to give to our kids. It means allowing ourselves to be imperfect, to learn from our mistakes, and to grow alongside them. One of the key concepts Brené discusses is the importance of empathy in parenting. It's easy to get frustrated when our kids don't behave the way we want them to. But empathy allows us to step into their shoes, to understand where they're coming from, and to respond with care and understanding, rather than judgment or frustration. When we approach our children with empathy, we teach them to do the same, to listen, to care, and to be kind. And let's not forget the role of play in wholehearted parenting. Play is where children learn about the world, where they express themselves, and where they form their sense of self. Brené reminds us that play isn't just for fun, it's a vital part of development. As parents, we need to create space for play, for joy, for lightness. When we engage in playful moments with our kids, we allow them to feel safe, supported, and seen. Brené ends this chapter by emphasizing a powerful message. Wholehearted parenting is not about getting it right all the time. It's about showing up with love and intention. It's about being present in the messy moments, being open to learning, and being willing to fall short and try again. When we parent with vulnerability, we teach our children that it's okay to be themselves, flaws and all. We teach them that they don't have to be perfect to be worthy of love, and that they are enough just as they are. And in doing so, we give them the tools to grow into resilient, compassionate, and wholehearted individuals. Parenting isn't easy, but if we can embrace the courage to be vulnerable, to show up authentically, and to let go of the need for perfection, we create an environment where both we and our children can thrive. And isn't that the greatest gift we can give? As we wrap up this journey through Daring Greatly, let's take a moment to reflect on the heart of Brené Brown's message. Vulnerability is not a weakness, it's a strength. It's a superpower, a force that allows us to live more fully, connect more deeply, and be the truest versions of ourselves. This book isn't just a guide, it's an invitation to live courageously, to stop hiding behind walls, and to show up in our lives, authentically and unashamedly. We often think of vulnerability as something fragile, something to avoid at all costs. But Brown flips that belief completely. Vulnerability, she teaches us, is the foundation of everything that matters. It's in the moments when we allow ourselves to be seen, messy, imperfect, real, that we make our deepest connections, achieve our greatest growth, and experience life in its fullest form. When we're brave enough to let our guard down, we find out what we're truly capable of. But it's not easy, is it? The world tells us to be perfect, to have it all together, to avoid failure and rejection at all costs. Yet, in doing so, we miss out on the beauty of living wholeheartedly. Brown reminds us that true courage is not about being fearless. It's about showing up, even when we're scared. It's about embracing discomfort, stepping into uncertainty, and trusting that we are enough just as we are. Throughout this book, Brown shows us the transformative power of vulnerability. She says it's not something to be ashamed of. In fact, vulnerability is the key to courage, to creativity, to building deeper relationships, and to finding true joy. It's about giving ourselves permission to be human, to fail, to learn, and to grow without the constant pressure to be perfect. And as we learn to embrace our imperfections, we open the door to authentic connection. One of the most powerful ideas Brown shares is that shame thrives in silence. It tells us we're not enough, that we don't belong. But when we speak our truth, when we share our stories, we take away shame's power. We step into the light, and we find that we're not alone. We realize that we are all worthy of love, connection, and belonging, just as we are. We don't have to hide behind masks or pretend to be something we're not. We are enough. But here's the thing, living vulnerably, living with courage is a practice. It's not a one-time thing. It's not something we can master overnight. It's a choice we make, over and over again, to show up, to be real, to be seen. And with every choice we make to be vulnerable, we grow stronger, braver, and more connected. We create a life where we don't have to hide, where we can let go of perfection and embrace imperfection as part of our unique journey. And Brown doesn't stop there. She challenges us to build a world where vulnerability is celebrated, not shamed. Imagine a world where we don't have to put up walls to protect ourselves. Where we can show up, be honest, and know we'll be accepted, supported, and loved for who we truly are. That's the world we have the power to create, starting with us, starting with the courage to be vulnerable. So, as you step away from daring greatly, remember this: dare to be seen. Dare to show up in your life with all your imperfections, all your mess, and all your beauty. Dare to be vulnerable, because that's where true strength lies. It's only when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable that we can experience the depth of what it means to live a rich, meaningful life. And when we do, we unlock the magic of connection, courage, and authenticity. And here's the best part: when we live this way, we give others permission to do the same. We create a ripple effect, where vulnerability is no longer something to fear, but something to celebrate. When we show up fully, we inspire others to do the same. And in doing so, we create a world that's more connected, more compassionate, and more human. So go ahead, take the leap. Step into the arena. Dare to be vulnerable. Because when you do, you'll find a life that's more rich, more real, and more connected than you ever thought possible. And that's the true power of daring greatly. If you found this summary insightful and valuable, don't forget to show your support by subscribing to the Mindful Brief on YouTube. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this audiobook summary, share it with your peers, friends, or family who might benefit from it, and leave a comment below with your thoughts. Your engagement helps us create more in-depth and valuable content for you. Stay tuned for more summaries, insights, and strategies to elevate your knowledge and career. Subscribe now and be part of the journey.